Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the life of a queen who ruled through myth, powdered her face with poison, and never let the world see her sleep. Elizabeth, I didn't just wear the crown. She turned herself into a legend and never took it off. So, while you're getting comfortable, feel free to tap like and subscribe if this kind of calm, late-night history is your thing. And I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment with your city and what time it was when you pressed play. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The morning begins not with sunlight, but with movement. You are not the first to rise in the palace, not by a long shot. The people who orbit your body like moons have already lit the coals, drawn the bath, laid out the jewels, and examined the sky for omens. Long before you open your eyes, a chambermaid has crept into your room and stirred the fire back to life, while another adjusts the curtains just enough to let in the dull silver of dawn, not the full sun. Your day does not begin with warmth. It begins with calculation. Your eyes open, but you do not stretch. There is no sigh, no groan, no casual shuffle from the bed to the floor. Instead, your limbs remain arranged in their practiced stillness. One movement too sharp, too human, might unravel the whole illusion. Even alone, and you are never truly alone, you wake as the queen. Before you've said a word, someone's already murmuring the schedule for the day. Audiences, petitions, a whispered meeting with Cecil, and an inspection of the fleet's readiness. You're not sure if they're telling you these things, or reminding themselves. Either way, you nod. A pair of maids approaches like they're handling sacred cloth, and they are. Your body is not entirely your own. It is a site of national interest. They pour warm water over your hands and wrists, swaddle your shoulders in clean linen, and begin their ritual. Dressing you is not simply a matter of clothing. It's performance, politics, devotion, and pressure, all stitched into seams and soaked in powder. The corset laces tighter each year, each season, each ruler. You inhale as deeply as you dare. Your ribs complain softly, but there's no space for complaint here. Not in the privy chamber, and certainly not in your own skin. You sit before a mirror the size of a serving platter, framed in gilded wood and clouded slightly from age. The glass, like everything around you, lies. It softens lines and flattens depth, makes your eyes seem untroubled, your cheeks fuller than they feel beneath the fingertips of your waiting attendants. The first layer is a pale paste that smells faintly of vinegar and crushed oyster shell. It goes on like a funeral mass, thick, cold, and chalky, and it never really dries. You don't flinch anymore when it touches your lips. One woman dusts your neck and chest with a fine powder made from white lead, while another draws your brows higher and darker than nature gave them. A third handles your hair, coaxing it into impossible loops that will be pinned, padded, and eventually covered. You have wigs for different occasions, the softer auburn for court, the heavier reddish gold for processions. They are so heavy that your neck aches by afternoon, but they tell the right story. That you are young, that you are untouched, that you are more than mortal. Every part of your morning is a layer, fabric, paint, jewels, gestures. You are being assembled, detail by detail, into the queen the world expects to see. The real you, whoever she might have been, was lost years ago. Probably sometime between the first assassination attempt and the second forced marriage proposal. Now you are icon, myth, monarch. Your body has been turned into a screen, and everyone is watching to see what you'll project next. Once you're dressed, the ritual continues. You walk the long gallery toward the private chapel, your train carried by girls barely into their teens, all silent as ghosts. The floor creaks beneath your steps, but no one else makes a sound. You know the guards who stand like statues along the wall. Some have held those halberds since you were just Elizabeth, not yet Gloriana. A few you trust. Most you don't. Not because they've done anything wrong, simply because trust is a luxury you can no longer afford. At chapel, you mouth prayers you've known since childhood, though now they feel less like supplication and more like political theater. You thank God for strength, for wisdom, for protection from your enemies. You ask nothing. Asking suggests lack, and queens are not supposed to lack anything. The sermon is brief, and you're grateful for that. You can feel the tightness in your bodice tug against your ribs with each shallow breath, and the scent of melting beeswax candles makes your stomach roil just slightly. You smile anyway. Later, you sit for a formal breakfast that feels more like a diplomatic summit. Nothing about the meal is spontaneous. The silverware gleams with obsessive polish. The fruit is arranged like a still life painting, and every dish has been tasted by someone else first. Even the bread has been handled by at least 3 people before it reaches your fingers. You eat slowly, carefully, as if your very act of chewing might cause rumors to spread. Was she chewing too fast? Was she favoring her left side? Was that a cough? Behind you, ministers wait for an opening. They don't speak yet, but they shift just enough to make themselves noticed. They want something. They always want something. An appointment, a signature, a suggestion to be passed quietly to a nobleman with ambitions. Everyone wants something from the queen, even the ones who say they only serve her. And you, as always, must give nothing while seeming generous. It is an old game, but it never gets easier. When the day's councils begin, you have already put on a second version of yourself. The clothing is different now, more formal, more stiff, layered with symbolism. The ruff is wider. The sleeves are structured like wings. The jewels are heavier. Everything about you says permanence, legacy, command. The men who await your judgment bow low, and though some wear swords and others wear the polished smiles of bureaucrats, none dare meet your gaze for too long. That is as it should be. They must believe that looking directly at you is like staring into the sun. Still, beneath the fine silk, the pain lingers. Your body reminds you of its limits. A swollen ankle, a twitch in your eye, the dull pressure behind your brow that arrives just before a storm. But you cannot pause. You cannot let it show. If a single member of the Privy Council suspects weakness, it could ripple across the realm faster than any ship can sail. So you sit taller, speak slowly, weigh every sentence like it's made of gold dust. And when they leave the room, they will all believe you are unshakable. Only when the door closes do you let your shoulders drop, just slightly. Only then can you breathe, not deeply, but enough. You are not finished, not even close. Another audience is scheduled. A foreign diplomat has requested a private audience. His timing is deliberate. He arrives bearing gifts, rumors, and maybe provocations. You already know what you must do next. But before that, before you meet him, you must return to your chamber. You must sit before the mirror once more, not to change your clothes, but to create your face. The one the world needs to see. The mirror doesn't blink. It waits for you the way the court waits, patient, unfeeling, expectant. You sit in front of it again, and already the room starts shifting into a sacred space. Your ladies gather like quiet priests preparing a relic. The brushes are laid out, the powders are opened, and once again, you give them your skin like a canvas, ready to be built into something greater, or at least something more useful. This is not vanity. It is preparation. No one believes that Elizabeth Tudor prepares for battle in armor, and yet that's exactly what you do. You wield no sword, but your face is a shield, your eyes a calculated offense, and your expression a masterclass in control. Today's version of your face must be particularly precise. The ambassador you'll receive is from Spain, and while his letters drip with diplomacy, you know his eyes will be trained on your age. He will report whether your cheeks sag or your hands tremble. And in a court like yours, Those observations can tip the scales of treaties. The first layer is applied with a delicate hand, though it feels like wet plaster. White lid paste covers every visible inch of your skin, hiding freckles, fatigue, and time itself. It smells metallic and faintly bitter, but you've grown so used to it that its scent now feels like a signal. This is the moment when your day truly begins, not with your first step, but with your transformation. The white paint is your foundation, not just for your appearance, but for your authority. Pale skin is a sign of nobility, of detachment from labor, of divine distance from the mortal world. And in your case, it's also camouflage. No one must see how tired you really are. Layer by layer, they apply rouge to your cheeks, carefully balanced, not too flushed, and trace delicate crimson along your lips. Your mouth is painted small and sharp, a perfect oval that doesn't move too much. That's by design. A queen's laughter must be rare, and her fury must never be visible in a twisted snarl. Your eyes are lined in kohl, exaggerated upward just slightly, giving you the impression of wakefulness, even when you're nearly swaying from exhaustion. Even your eyebrows are enhanced, not only darkened, but shaped in a way that commands attention without appearing too severe. The final effect is not seductive. It's sacred. Some days, the transformation is convincing even to you. But today, you find yourself watching the mirror too closely, searching for the girl who once ran barefoot through the grass at Hatfield House. She is gone, replaced by a woman sculpted from powder and precision. The image that stares back at you now is not quite human. And that's the point. To the world, you are Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, chosen by Providence, ageless and pure. The mythology is fragile, but powerful. It is held together by 1,000 small details. The tightness of your ruff, the jewels arranged like constellations across your bodice, the portraits that present you as divine and immovable. One painting shows you with a hand on a globe, your fingers curled possessively around the world. Another, the Armada portrait, frames your face between vanquished fleets, your gown shimmering with oceans and moons. These are not likenesses, they are weapons. You do not simply appear in them, you reign in them. And yet, the irony is sharp. Behind each of these portraits is a question no one dares ask aloud. Where does Elizabeth end and the image begin? The answer changes with each audience, each letter, each banquet. You've become fluent in self-invention. Your face is your language. It has to be, because words can betray and feelings are liabilities. No one must know if you're afraid, if you're unsure, if you're lonely, especially if you're lonely. Your ladies, for all their whispers and obedience, know this dance well. They're not just servants. They're choreographers of the illusion. One adjusts your wig, another tightens the jewel-studded collar until your chin rises naturally. A third pins a tiny golden phoenix at your shoulder, your emblem of rebirth and invincibility. It glints in the candlelight, an echo of your mother's badge, the falcon. A clever nod, but one only the boldest would recognize. And even then, they'd be wise not to mention it. Occasionally, you wonder how much your face has changed from the girl once declared illegitimate, cast aside by politics, made into a pawn by kings who thought they understood power. You doubt they would recognize this version of you. You hardly recognize it yourself. Somewhere beneath the layers of pearl and chalk and ink, your own skin waits patiently. But it will not see daylight. It hasn't for years. There's a tension in the air as the final touches are made. One of your ladies whispers that the ambassador has arrived. You do not blink. You sit still, letting the silence settle around you like silk. Every movement from here on must be measured. You rise slowly, your gown shifting like a wave of brocade. You cross to the full-length mirror in the corner of the room, not for approval, but for confirmation. The woman in the reflection is perfect, otherworldly, untouchable. Still, a part of you wonders, what does he hope to see? Not the ambassador. Men like him are predictable. No, you wonder about the kingdom itself. The people, the poets, the daughters of merchants who dress their hair to look like yours, the boys who carve your initials into tree trunks. What do they imagine when they picture you? Do they believe in the myth you've become? Do they know how carefully it's built? You exit the chamber, your steps echoing down the corridor with a rhythm that silences conversation. Everyone stands straighter as you pass. They don't speak unless spoken to. They barely breathe. You've mastered the art of presence, of carrying the weight of majesty in your bearing alone. And yet, behind your eyes, something flickers. A memory, perhaps, or a doubt. It doesn't matter. By the time you enter the receiving room, it's gone. The ambassador bows so deeply, he nearly topples. His gifts are elaborate, his compliments practiced. You smile just enough. You let the silence stretch after his greeting, long enough to make him uncomfortable. Then, finally, you speak. Your voice is even, musical, edged in frost. He looks pleased just to have earned a response. You are pleased, too, not because you like him, but because the mask is held. You have outlasted his scrutiny. And yet, you know this meeting is just the first test of the day. More audiences will follow. Courtiers will push for favors. Nobles will try to read meaning into the tilt of your head, the wrinkle of your sleeve. You cannot afford to slip, even for a moment. For in this court, as you know too well, even the slightest misstep can spiral into scandal. A glance can be mistaken for weakness, a smile for promise. You must wield your face like a blade, sharp and shimmering. Still, it's not just protection you need, it's advantage. You must turn this gaze upon the court itself, redirect the watching eyes, and stay ahead of the whispering lips. And that's where the next game begins, not at the mirror, but in the hall beyond it, where flattery clings to the air like perfume, and every ally comes with a price. The court is already buzzing by the time you arrive, even though no one has actually said a word. It buzzes in silence, through glances, subtle nods, the carefully timed clearing of throats and rustle of silk. There are no shouted greetings in your presence, no spontaneous embraces, no warmth not weighed first against ambition. The closer people get to your person, the less real their expressions become. Here, a raised eyebrow can mean allegiance or insult. A bow too deep might mask a betrayal. You've known men to die over less. As you take your place, the shift in atmosphere is immediate. It's not just that everyone lowers their voices, it's that their very postures change. Shoulders straighten, hands smooth gowns, eyes brighten. You are not merely being observed, you are being studied. Every step you take has potential consequences. And the most dangerous game being played isn't war or policy. It's flattery. That treacherous currency you're forced to spend and accept in unequal measure. They come to you like moths to fire, and they burn in the process, some gladly, some without ever realizing they've caught flame. The flattery arrives first as poetry. Young courtiers compose verses filled with impossible metaphors, comparing you to celestial bodies, marble statues, or rare birds that never quite existed. One calls your voice, softer than Venus rising from a silver shell. Another swears your hair could blind the sun itself. You smile at both. You praise neither. Favor is not given to those who beg for it too eagerly. Then there are the tokens, gifts wrapped in velvet, pendants etched with trembling hands, tiny mechanical birds that sing when wound with golden keys. One lord once gifted you a clock that told the time and whispered prayers every hour. You accepted it with grace and never looked at it again. You've learned that the grander the gift, the more dangerous the motive. Still, to refuse such things is to risk insult, and to accept them is to invite expectation. There is no neutral choice. Every response is a maneuver. You see the way they speak to you, always slightly deferential, always just one heartbeat away from performance. Even your oldest allies, Cecil, Walsingham, Leicester, Choose their words carefully. No one calls you by name, of course. You are your majesty, your grace, my sovereign. Not Elizabeth, not daughter, not woman. It's hard to remember when you last heard someone use your name without calculation. Perhaps that's why you treasure your most private exchanges, even the small ones, even if they're laced with their own complexities. There is a particular weight to being the sun in your own solar system. Everyone orbits you, drawn in by necessity or fascination, but never too close for long. Get too near, and either you burn them, or they eclipse you. The trick is to keep them spinning, to make them think that they might, if they flatter just right, just once, rise a little higher in your sky. Some of them learn the rhythm quickly. They know when to compliment your wit, not just your beauty. When to remark upon your command of Latin, your clever turns of phrase in French, your firm grasp of statcraft. These are the ones who last longer. The ones who realize that flattery alone is not enough. It must be wrapped in usefulness. Those who flatter only your appearance are discarded like wilted bouquets. Those who flatter your mind and serve your needs tend to find themselves at the heart of court. But the court is not made solely of clever men. It is also filled with whisperers. Rumor is its own form of flattery, twisted and indirect. When they whisper of your eternal youth, your virginity, your divine guidance, they are not just flattering you. They are flattering the idea of England. You are myth and monarch in equal measure, and everyone has a hand in shaping that myth. One ambassador once remarked that England had two queens, the one who ruled and the one who appeared in pageants and paintings. He meant it as a compliment. You took it as a warning. Beneath the surface of courtly grace runs a deep vein of fear. Not your fear, though you carry plenty, but theirs. They fear falling out of favor, misjudging your mood, misunderstanding your silences. You have banished men for less. You have had traitors executed for letters never sent. You are not cruel, but you are consistent. You do not tolerate disloyalty, even when it comes wrapped in sorrow. The scaffold is a part of your court, even when the wood is hidden behind tapestries. Everyone knows it's there. Yet what fascinates you most are those who dare to dance closer, the ones who don't flatter with verse or gifts, but with challenge. They risk small defiance, a well-placed joke, a glance that lingers a half-second longer than protocol allows. They make your court feel less like a machine and more like a living thing. Robert Dudley did this once. His laughter would echo through your halls like no one else's, and it made you feel, briefly, less alone. But even he learned that affection has rules here, and when he tested those boundaries too hard, the price was heavy. You sometimes wonder what your court would look like if they could see you truly, not just as the crown in the face, but as the woman behind it, the woman who still remembers being locked in the tower, uncertain of the next dawn. The woman who rehearses every sentence hours in advance because she knows that the wrong phrase, the wrong blink, could be interpreted as weakness. Would they still sing your praises then? Would they still swarm with silks and bows in verse? Historians still debate the sincerity of the praise you received. Did your courtiers truly adore you? Or did they merely fear the absence of your light? In truth, you no longer know the answer yourself. The lines have blurred. Perhaps that's the price of power. Not knowing which smiles are real, which hands are steady because they are loyal, and which because they are rehearsed. You've been queen for decades now, and the mask has held, but it has also grown heavy. There is, of course, one constant expectation in all of this, the role of love. Not for you to feel it, but to inspire it. To be worshipped, adored, longed for. You are not allowed to love, but you must always appear lovable. You must evoke passion without returning it, desire without fulfillment. And that has become its own performance, perhaps the most complicated one of all. As the court begins to shift once more, courtiers shuffling toward their next appointment, poets clutching rewritten sonnets, diplomats rehearsing their smiles, You remain still. Your hands rest softly in your lap, unmoved, while your mind turns toward the next part of your day, the part where affection is currency and restraint is survival, where you must become the woman who can invite love with a glance and deny it with grace. You know exactly how they look at you. Their glances shift when they believe you're not watching, though you always are. Some gaze with awe, others with calculation, and a few with the sort of longing that makes you cautious. The court has turned your unmarried status into a national fascination, as though your lack of a husband is not just a political choice, but a romantic cliffhanger the entire kingdom is waiting to see resolved. But there will be no resolution, no marriage plot, no final kiss to tie up the tale. You've decided that long ago, if not aloud, then in the quiet places behind your ribs. To love openly would be a luxury, and luxuries are not for queens. You learned this not in triumph, but in the bitter training grounds of your youth, where love always came paired with betrayal. You watched your father fall in and out of it with reckless cruelty. One queen replaced by another as easily as a wine cup at dinner. You saw what happened when women gave into affection. They lost their heads, their names, their place in history. Your mother was charming, clever, bold, and it got her a spot on the scaffold. You understood early that to survive in a man's world meant weaponizing charm, not surrendering to it. You may flirt, but you must never fall. You may encourage, but you must never yield. The suitors came like waves, French princes, Swedish kings, archdukes polished to a shine, and you parried them all with elegant refusals. Each proposal was answered with diplomacy. Each ambassador met with grace. The court was fed enough possibility to keep hope alive, but not enough to secure an engagement. A marriage would have pleased many. It would have strengthened alliances. It would have silenced whispers. But it would have ended you. Not in body, perhaps, but certainly in authority. Marriage would mean a shared throne. It would mean expectations of heirs, of submission, of being guided. No matter how well-meaning the husband, he would be crowned in his own right, and your choices would no longer be solely your own. Your reign would become a partnership, and not on your terms. To marry would be to surrender your singularity. And if you fought for anything in this life, it is the right to be singular. Still, the burden is not light. You cannot show loneliness, and yet you must radiate the kind of allure that nations compete for. Your court needs to believe you are desirable enough to tempt kings, yet above desire itself. In paintings, you are presented as ageless, untouchable, even divine. In person, you must play the same part. Your eyes must glimmer with invitation. Your voice must carry the softness of a secret, even when you are saying nothing at all. And always, your heart must remain locked in a tower of your own making. The irony, of course, is that you have loved deeply, perhaps even foolishly once. Robert Dudley is the name everyone still speaks in hushed tones, though most have learned not to linger on it when you're near. He was your childhood companion, your confidant, your echo in a court full of noise. When he laughed, it felt like sunlight through stained glass, unexpected, fragile, warm. But he was married, then widowed, and then dangerously close to becoming a political liability. The court whispered about secret weddings. Foreign observers sent reports implying scandal. And though nothing could ever be proven, that didn't matter. The very idea of your closeness was enough to make you appear weak. So you kept him close, but just out of reach. You granted him lands, titles, access, but not your hand, not officially. Even after all those years, even after he fell ill and wrote you that final letter, his last letter, you still call it. You did not let the world know how deeply you felt it. To do so would have cracked the image, and once the cracks begin, they don't stop. You've practiced the art of loving from a distance so well that it's now second nature. Your affections, such as they are, exist only in glances, in gifts never spoken of aloud, in poetry never signed. You surround yourself with beautiful men, charming men, younger men. You let them orbit you like moons, safe in their belief that they might be the one to thaw you. They never are. That is their role, to desire, not to possess. Even your own ladies-in-waiting sometimes wonder aloud, in the safe privacy of whispered corridors, whether you've known physical affection at all. Whether the title Virgin Queen is literal or just another careful fiction. You never answer these questions, not even to yourself. What matters is that the world believes it. Your virginity has become a shield. It separates you from the queens before you, from the beheaded, the disgraced, the overruled. It also separates you from the women around you, most of whom are forced to marry for rank or alliance, their futures handed over in ink and wax. There are moments, quiet and sharp, when you wonder what a different life would feel like. To lie beside someone without consequence. To touch and not be watched. To be loved not as an idea, not as an emblem of a country, but as a person with small flaws and warm hands. But then morning comes, and you are powdered and pinned and stepped into like a statue being assembled, and the wondering fades. You do not love, not anymore. But you must still be loved. It is expected of you. The poets write of you as if their hearts were carved from yours. The soldiers paint your name on their shields. Foreign kings call you Ma Cheri, even as they plot against your shores. This adoration is not personal. It is strategic, necessary. You are the Virgin Queen, and the nation is your consort. Their loyalty must be won daily, not through children or husbands, but through spectacle, strength, and the impossible elegance of restraint. This dance, this carefully maintained contradiction, has become your most enduring role. No matter how long the reign or how deep the fatigue, you cannot stop performing it. Even in your most private hours, your thoughts are shaped by what the court expects you to be. You long for peace, perhaps even for softness, but you fear what might happen if you ever let go of the mask. You fear the silence that might follow, and who might try to fill it. As the candles are snuffed one by one, and the court retires into velvet and whispers, you remain awake a little longer, seated by the window, eyes scanning the black silhouette of London beyond the glass. The stars don't shine as much here as they did in childhood. They're dimmed by smoke and distance. Still, you search for them, half hoping they remember you as more than a queen. Maybe as someone who once wished and meant it. It's late now. The court quiets. The attendants tiptoe. The masks are stored for morning. But you, as always, carry yours into the night, into the soft rustle of your chambers, into dreams where perhaps no one watches and no one needs anything from you. A few more steps carry you toward the sanctuary of sleep, or something close to it. But even there, you are not alone. Even sleep, in your world, is ceremonial. It begins not with exhaustion, but with procedure, a sequence of movements and gestures designed less for rest and more for reassurance. You cannot simply yawn, stretch, and collapse into the warmth of linen. You are the Queen of England. Your descent into sleep must pass through the hands of half a dozen people who know your night routine better than you do. You are undressed with reverence, unpinned layer by layer, each clasp and ribbon surrendered in silence. Your wig is removed first, revealing the thin, tightly coiled hair beneath, graying now at the temples and flattened by long days of discomfort. It's a strange moment, always, the transition from icon to woman. You see it in the mirror when the phoenix brooch is unpinned from your shoulder, and your jewels are returned to velvet-lined boxes. You see it in your lady's eyes as they avoid lingering glances at your scalp, your raw collarbone, the spots where paint has dried and cracked. They don't look because it reminds them that you are not timeless, that even a queen bruises. The corset, when finally loosened, makes you gasp softly, not from pain, but from the sudden, jarring realization that your lungs can fill again. It's not something you notice until it's gone. That constriction. You place a hand on your side briefly, as if to check that your ribs are still intact. Your ladies pause respectfully, pretending not to notice your discomfort, though they've seen it before. The red lines across your skin, the faint bruises. You've joked before that queens are made of steel and silk. Tonight, it feels like mostly bruises. Once you're in your nightgown, embroidered linen, simple but still regal, your face is carefully wiped clean. The white paint does not come off easily. It lingers like memory. There's a certain intimacy to it, being washed like this, though not the kind that brings comfort. The cloth is warm, but the room is cold, and the lead paste sticks stubbornly, like it doesn't want to let go. Sometimes it takes 3 cloths to restore your face to something resembling your own. And even then, the woman in the mirror looks like a rumor. The bedchamber is grand, but not cozy. Your canopied bed towers like a monument, carved oak posts rising into velvet drapes that keep the world out, or at least try to. The ceiling is painted with faded stars. You chose that detail yourself, not because you believe in astrology, necessarily, but because you liked the idea of being watched over by something older than your crown. A reminder, perhaps, that there are still things above you. Not many, but some. As you approach the bed, the room begins its subtle retreat. Attendants gather your discarded garments with practiced hands. The last of your letters are placed beside your bed in case you wake with something urgent on your mind. A warm cup of posset, milk, wine, and spices is set on a silver tray within arm's reach. The fire has been fed one final time, its glow flickering across the wooden floor. And then the others withdraw, leaving only your most trusted lady-in-waiting and 2 guards just beyond the door. You are never alone, not even here. The curtains are drawn closed around your bed as you slip beneath the heavy sheets. The weight of the coverlet is oddly comforting. Not like the crown, or the stiff collars, or the expectations. It presses down evenly, without judgment. You let your fingers rest atop the fabric, feeling the stitching beneath your nails. An intricate pattern of Tudor roses, some of which you remember choosing yourself. You like small things that are yours. There aren't many left. Even now, as the fire dims and the hush settles, you are watched. The lady who sleeps in the adjoining chamber is trained to listen for your breath. If it changes, if it catches or stutters, she will rise and check on you. The guards outside shift quietly every hour, their boots muffled but present. You've grown used to it. In fact, you're not sure you'd be able to sleep without it. The silence of true solitude would likely wake you more than any noise. And yet, this presence, this constant awareness of others, does not make you feel safe. It makes you feel guarded in the literal sense. You are not protected so much as contained. A crown cannot simply be removed and set aside for the night. Even in sleep, you are responsible. Even unconscious, you belong to the country. There are letters you haven't read, decisions waiting for signatures, marriages that remain unresolved. You think about all of it as your eyes begin to close. Your dreams come lightly when they come at all. Sometimes they're filled with childhood, the scent of apples in the orchard at Hatfield, the creaking of wood beneath your feet as you ran barefoot down uncarpeted halls. Sometimes, more rarely, you dream of your mother, not as she was in court portraits, but in flashes. The hem of her dress, the sound of her voice when she hummed. You wonder often if you truly remember her, or if your mind has created her out of longing and scraps of description. Historians still argue over how much of her you carried with you. They debate whether your policies were influenced by her execution, whether your refusal to marry was shaped by the shadow she cast. They don't ask whether you miss her. That question is too small for them, too human. But you do, or you think you do. You're not sure anymore whether what you feel is memory, or simply the ache of not knowing, of having had a mother, briefly, and then a silence where her name should have been. Sometimes you lie awake and listen to the palace. It creaks, groans, settles around you. You know it sounds better than any lover. You know where the rats scurry near the tapestries. You know which beam in the ceiling expands when the fire is burned too long. You know the rhythm of footsteps in the corridors, the guards, the messengers, the medics. You can tell from sound alone whether they're walking with purpose or panic. It's your palace after all, but it's not your home. It never was. The room grows darker now, the fire low, its glow like a heartbeat on the wall. You let your breath slow, not because sleep is coming easily, but because your body demands stillness. Tomorrow will bring performances again, layers of paint, courtly smiles, questions disguised as compliments. You will wake as a queen again, whether you want to or not. But for now, in these last soft minutes before you drift, you try to believe in the fiction of privacy. You try to imagine that no one needs you, not just for an hour, but for a whole night. Somewhere behind the drawn curtains, a candle flickers out. A clock ticks. Another guard is replaced. The palace does not rest, even when you do. You sleep in velvet and gold, and yet your dreams wear simpler things. They walk barefoot, they laugh freely, and they are never watched. You turn slightly, pulling the covers higher, your face half buried in the pillow. You close your eyes, knowing full well they'll open again before long, before the first knock, the first whispered message, the first new crisis to be solved before breakfast. But for now, for just a little while longer, you allow yourself this rare quiet. And somewhere deep within the folds of your dreams, you ask yourself the question you're not supposed to voice. What would it have been like to sleep alone, and truly be alone? The morning comes quietly, slipping through the curtains like a servant who knows not to wake you too abruptly. And yet, wake you it does. You never sleep deeply. Even in your dreams, you are aware of your position, of the weight of your name, the burden of your crown, the eyes waiting just beyond the door. So when the knock comes, soft and expected, you're already upright, already bracing yourself to wear the day like another embroidered mantle. The bed is warm, the chamber still dim, and for a moment, just a moment, you remain sitting there, gathering yourself before the performance begins anew. It's in this stillness, before the paint and the pearls and the posture return, that the loneliness becomes sharpest. The kind that doesn't wound with sorrow, but with the realization that this, right now, is as close as you'll get to being unobserved. No one else knows what it means to rule from behind glass, to be adored by 1,000 voices and touched by none of them. You rise, and the illusion begins again. But no matter how well the morning ritual unfolds, how seamlessly the gown is drawn around you, how flawlessly the ruff is adjusted to frame your face like a portrait come alive, you carry the ache of that silence with you. It is not sadness, exactly. It is simply what remains when you are needed by everyone and understood by no one. You have your ladies, of course, your favorites, your confidants. They know how to make you laugh, how to offer comfort without stepping over boundaries. They distract when needed. They deliver gossip, sing songs, tell tales of lovers and mischief in the gallery. But even then, even in their affection, you are something other than equal. You are their queen first, and their friend only when it is safe. You've cultivated distance like a garden, pruned it, fed it, grown it into something useful. And yet, sometimes you envy those who fall in love and are ruined by it. You envy the simplicity of their mistakes, their freedom to choose badly. You don't have that. You never did. From the moment you were old enough to understand the stories whispered about your mother, you knew that your heart would never be your own to offer. The court, of course, speculates. It thrives on speculation. Did you love Dudley? Were you secretly married? Did you have a child tucked away in a country estate, raised by strangers? There are songs about it, bawdy ones you pretend not to hear. There are entire tavern arguments over whether your virginity is a divine gift or a clever lie. You let them argue. You let them wonder. In their wondering, you become myth. And myth is safer than truth. Because the truth is, the crown is heavy. Not just in the physical sense, though it pinches and itches and leaves your scalp raw, but in its solitude. Every decision is yours, and so is every consequence. Every time you sign a death warrant, every time you decline a marriage, every time you silence a rebellion with calculated coldness, it is your name that history records. They may call you Gloriana, but you are also the hand behind the scaffold's rope, the voice that sends ships to war, the figurehead who never gets to confess that sometimes she just wants to be held. Even the portraits lie. They paint you as ageless, serene, invulnerable. They hide the veins in your hands, the lines near your eyes, the fatigue behind your gaze. One artist once dared to paint you as you truly were, older, wearier, human. You had it destroyed, not because you hated it, but because you saw yourself in it too clearly and knew the court could never be allowed to see the same. Sometimes, on your rare walks through the palace gardens, you catch sight of other women, ladies in waiting, visiting nobles, giggling behind fans, blushing over secret glances. And something in you aches, not because you want what they have, necessarily, but because you want the right to want it, to feel what you feel without asking if it weakens the crown. You've surrounded yourself with symbols, phoenixes, pearls, moons, virginal white and royal crimson, not just to inspire your people, but to remind yourself of who you're supposed to be. The queen who endures, the woman who never bends, the monarch who will never leave the country vulnerable through love. The crown is your shield, but the shield has grown heavy. And still, you do not falter. You sit on the throne with poise. You answer questions with precision. You read every letter yourself, knowing no one else can be trusted with the full truth. You carry the loneliness with grace. And in doing so, you keep the kingdom whole. Yet deep down, beneath the silence of your chambers, beneath the gown and the titles and the expectations, a quieter version of yourself still waits. Not to escape, not to abdicate, just to be remembered as a woman who once laughed without rehearsing it, who once lost someone she loved, who once stood very small in a palace far too large, and wondered if she would live long enough to become anything more than a name in a prayer. But you did become more. You became legend, and you've held on to it with teeth clenched behind painted lips. Your solitude is not a failing. It is the price. And in your private heart, you have already paid it 1,000 times. Still, even legends have beginnings, small, painful ones born in blood and fear. And while the court may know only the queen you are today, the road to the crown was anything but glorious. Before the ruffs and the rituals, there was a young girl in a cold palace, listening for the sound of footsteps that might mean her death. If they had come one day sooner, England would have had no Gloriana, no myth, just a forgotten daughter, buried beside her disgraced mother. To understand your reign is to return to that child, to the one who watched a queen fall, who stood too close to the chopping block, and who learned before she learned anything else that survival begins in silence. You are 2.5 years old when the world changes forever, though no one dares explain it to you directly. One morning, the palace corridors fall strangely silent, the laughter of your nurses stilled, their steps oddly gentle. Even the dogs seem to bark less, as if some invisible hush has draped itself over the stones. Later, much later, you'll learn that this is the day your mother climbs the scaffold in a gown of gray damask and kneels before a sword made sharp with royal favor. They do not bring you to see it. Of course not. You are a child, and children are delicate. But that doesn't stop the echo. Even now, all these years later, you still hear it, low and distant, like a story told behind closed doors. The scrape of a blade, the crowd holding its breath, the precise moment when a queen becomes a body. Her name is spoken carefully afterward, if at all. Anne Boleyn, once adored, then destroyed, and always, somehow, yours. No one knows what they told you in those early days. Perhaps they called it an accident. Perhaps they said your mother had gone to rest, or that she was traveling. But you notice, even as a toddler, that the women in your household look away when you speak of her. You notice the way your father doesn't hold you as often after that day. You're not quite sure what it means yet, but something inside you recognizes the way people begin to hesitate when they use your name. They don't call you a princess anymore. You're moved to Hatfield, away from the court, surrounded by tutors and ladies who keep their opinions folded away in the pleats of their gowns. You are reminded to be obedient, modest, grateful. Your clothes are less fine than they were. Your name appears less frequently in letters. You are no longer heir. You are no longer legitimate. You are the daughter of a queen who dared to fail, and that is a dangerous thing to be. The world is careful with you now. Not loving, not cruel, just careful. Like you're a teacup with a hairline crack. Still useful, but best kept on a high shelf. Your half-sister Mary won't speak to you. Your father visits infrequently, and when he does, he praises your Latin, but not your smile. There's a space in your world where your mother's voice should be, and it never fills. Not with music, not with lessons, not with prayer. You try to be good. You try to be silent. But sometimes, in the dark, you speak to her. You tell her that you understand now why you can't have everything, why people pause before touching you, why you must learn to survive quietly. You memorize the sound of people withholding kindness. Still, your education continues. You excel. You quote Cicero and speak in Italian and read scripture in Greek. The adults are impressed, but not too impressed. It wouldn't be wise to praise you too loudly. Not with your mother's shadow still hanging in every chamber you walk through. She was clever too, they whisper. She was too clever. You learn early. That intelligence must be folded like embroidery into more acceptable shapes. Charm, poise, restraint. You learn to make your wit sound like innocence. You learn to make your ambition sound like patience. Sometimes you hear rumors of her last words, that she prayed for the king's happiness, that she forgave everyone, that she said she was ready. You wonder if they're true. You wonder if she looked for you in the crowd, even knowing you wouldn't be there. You wonder if she whispered your name, the way you whisper hers. Historians still argue about the charges against her: adultery, incest, treason. The list is absurd, yet deadly. Some say she was the victim of courtly envy. Others believe she simply lost the favor of a king whose affection turned faster than the wind. There are even those who claim she plotted too much, aimed too high, dared too greatly. But none of those versions matter to you. You are left only with what she left behind: her sharp cheekbones, her talent for languages, her reputation, and her ruin. Even the portraits are ambiguous. Most were destroyed or altered. The few that remain don't always agree with each other. Was her mouth as small as they say? Did she really have that sixth fingernail? Or was it just gossip spun by jealous rivals? The truth doesn't seem to matter. She became symbol before she became memory, and now she exists only in half-formed recollections and the way certain men look at you with caution, wondering if your mother's boldness lives on in you. You carry it quietly. You do not announce it, but you never forget. At court, when you're finally allowed to return for the occasional ceremony, you notice the way your footsteps echo. You notice how people glance first at your father, then at you, as if calculating something. You smile, demure and sweet. You thank them for their compliments, but you keep a careful list in your head: who flatters too much, who watches too closely, who avoids you altogether. These things matter. You don't know why yet, but you feel it. Some part of you already understands that safety lies in observation. And so you watch. You learn how gifts are given and how apologies are folded into formal letters. You see how women use glances to speak louder than words. You see how your father's moods shift with the seasons and how a man can fall from favor overnight with no explanation. You become fluent in unspoken things. And through it all, you remember what happened to your mother. Not just the blade, but the silence that followed it. There are moments, even as you grow, when you try to picture what life might have been if she had lived. If she had grown old, if she had taught you courtly charm, if she had sat beside you reading love poetry in French. You imagine her brushing your hair. You imagine her laughing. But the picture never fully forms. It slips away like steam. You have only her end, not her presence. You have the scaffold, not the cradle. Still, even from that end, she gave you something. Not softness, not safety, but a lesson, a truth etched deeper than blood. That power can be beautiful, but it is never safe. That favor can lift you and then feed you to the lions. That to survive, you must master your own image before someone else does it for you. So you rise, you study, you listen. And as the years unfold, you carry your mother not in grief, but in preparation. Because you know what few others are willing to admit. The crown does not come to those who love deeply, but to those who endure the absence of it without breaking. And in time, the court will learn that the quiet girl at Hatfield is not so easy to erase. That the daughter of Anne Boleyn has inherited more than her dark eyes and cutting tongue. She has inherited the resolve to outlast them all. The cold doesn't reach you right away. It waits like everything else in the tower. It creeps into the stone slowly, through your slippers, through the seams of your sleeves, until your skin begins to hum with it. The room is not a cell, exactly. It's furnished, barely, and the windows are too high to see through. But you can feel the weight in the air. You know what this place is. You've known it since childhood. It's where people go to wait for someone else's decision to end their lives. The guards outside don't look at you when they bring your meals. Their faces stay still, polite, careful. One calls you Lady Elizabeth instead of Princess, and you catch the hesitation in his voice. You don't correct him. You barely speak. The fewer words you use, the fewer they can twist. You know enough now to say less than you mean, and mean less than you feel. That's the safest way. Your prayer book becomes your closest companion. You hold it like a talisman, the pages worn from your thumbs pressing the corners. You read the same verses over and over, not because they comfort you, but because they anchor you. In a place where you are not allowed to move freely, even your thoughts must be kept on a short leash. You pray out loud, sometimes in Latin, knowing that the sound of your voice is being recorded in someone's memory, and perhaps in a report. Even your piety is evidence here. The charges are vague, but dangerous. They say you conspired with the rebels, that you knew of the plot, that you wrote letters you cannot produce. They say your servants spoke too freely, and now their words hang over your head like a blade you can't see. You write a careful response, sharp, clean, free of warmth or apology. It is a document of survival, not explanation. Every sentence is weighed like a coin, and you offer them just enough to appear obedient without confessing to something you didn't do. You do not cry. You've learned that tears, once shed, are remembered more vividly than anything you say. Instead, you pace the small floor when no one is watching. You recite lines from Virgil under your breath. You conjure your mother's eyes, her fall, and remind yourself what silence cost her. Then you press your lips together and go quiet again. They will not catch you begging. They will not catch you off guard. Every morning, you wake expecting it to be your last. The sounds that drift through the thick walls, the bells, the shifting guards, the soft clatter of keys, become omens. You train your ears to recognize footsteps. You flinch less when the door rattles. And yet, when it swings open too quickly one afternoon, your breath still catches. It's just another servant. Still, you sleep poorly that night. Your dreams come with the scent of smoke and the sound of sawed wood being built into platforms. Mary, your sister, does not write to you. She sends no assurances, no explanations. Her counsel speaks for her, cold and precise. You are reminded often that you are here only because she permits you to live, that your life is a thread she holds between two fingers. You think of your father then, the man who could laugh at breakfast and sign an execution before supper, and you wonder how much of him lives in her. The other prisoners are ghosts. You do not see them. You are not supposed to. But sometimes, in the deep quiet, you hear someone cough. Once, you think you hear singing, a low voice, male, humming a hymn you almost recognize. You do not know if it's real. The tower has a way of offering illusions when you need them most. Or perhaps it simply reflects your thoughts so loudly that you mistake them for someone else's. You write letters you will never send, just to stay sharp. One to Mary, polite and deliberate. One to your stepmother, who no longer visits. One to a version of yourself, younger, standing in the gardens of Hatfield, with a Latin book pressed to her chest. You tell her to remember everything, to notice what's said and what's left unsaid, to never trust comfort when it comes too easily. The food is edible. The air is dry. Your joints ache in the mornings, and your hair has begun to fall out more than usual. You hide the strands in your sleeves, unwilling to let the servants carry them away, like souvenirs. They would end up in some report, described in the margin. Her Grace's appearance declines. You will not give them that. The candles are your only company at night. You watch the flame, its small sway. It becomes a friend of sorts. At least it does not ask questions. You wonder how many queens have sat in this same stillness. You wonder if your mother's last hours were spent staring at light like this, chasing warmth while waiting for the cold of history to claim her. There's a part of you, small, buried, that wonders if you will be remembered, not as a traitor, not as your mother's daughter, not as someone who failed to bow deeply enough at the right moment, but as someone who endured, someone who didn't unravel, even when her world became 4 stone walls and a list of accusations that changed by the day. You know now that survival is not just a matter of blood, it is a matter of performance. Even in here, with no court to impress, you hold yourself like a queen. One day, finally, the letter arrives. You are to be released. The ink is fresh, but the mercy feels stale. It is not forgiveness. It is politics. The crowd outside is not there to welcome you, but to watch, to judge your expression, to analyze the angle of your posture, the color of your gown, the size of your escort. You walk out of the tower like a woman made of iron, not because you feel brave, but because they expect to see someone broken, and you refuse to give them that pleasure. You do not cry. You do not smile. You only nod once to the sun, as though greeting an old friend you had not expected to see again. And as the tower shrinks behind you, as the river bends out of view, you understand something you hadn't before, that the people who survive this world are not the ones who scream. They are the ones who keep walking. But you are not free yet. You may have left the tower, but its shadows follow you. The court still watches. The crown still hovers, close enough to see, but far enough to cost everything if you reach too quickly. And as you step back into the world of courtiers and whispers, you realize that danger has only changed its shape. The real test is ahead now, and it walks the line between favor and failure, between loyalty and ambition, between life and the quiet end you've already glimpsed through iron bars. You are back at court, but you walk it like a tightrope. There is no applause for your return, no garlands, no celebratory feast in your honor. Instead, you are met with narrowed eyes and carefully phrased greetings, the kind that offer welcome while hiding suspicion. Everyone remembers the tower, even if they never speak of it. especially because they never speak of it. And now, every move you make is watched more closely than before, as if the walls of your former cell have simply followed you here and become invisible. You smile anyway, not because you feel safe, but because it is the one weapon they can't confiscate. The smile of a woman who knows she's still alive is sharper than steel. You wear it like a blade in your sleeve, sheathed in pearls and courtesy. When courtiers speak to you, they lower their voices. When they hand you gifts, they do so with fingers that shake just slightly. You were supposed to come back quieter, more grateful, smaller. You did not. Instead, you begin studying the game with even more care. You know which nobleman has debts he doesn't mention. You know which lady passes messages too frequently to the Spanish envoy. You know who drinks too much, who talks too freely, who leans a little too close to the queen during mass. You become fluent in the vocabulary of power. Glances, pauses, compliments that are also warnings. You collect secrets without even asking for them. People want to speak to you, even when they shouldn't, especially when they shouldn't. Mary still rules, and you never forget that. She is queen by law, by faith, by fire. She signs edicts with a steady hand and watches Protestants burn with eyes that do not waver. You keep your prayers quiet. You do not write too much. You make no alliances without the appearance of innocence. Your half-sister is not cruel without cause, but she is deeply afraid of rebellion, of betrayal, of your very existence. You are the Protestant heir. You are younger. You are, unfortunately, popular. And that makes you dangerous, even if you do nothing at all. So you do as little as possible. Or at least, that's how it looks. You flatter Mary in your letters. You dress modestly. You express no desire for court appointments or titles. You decline too much attention. And yet, in the corners of every room, in the margin of every diplomat's letter, your name appears. Elizabeth dined with so-and-so. Elizabeth attended Mass. Elizabeth was seen walking with the ambassador. They track you not because of what you do, but because of what you might be. Your greatest advantage is this: they don't know what you want. You keep it hidden, folded behind small gestures, behind polite nods and restrained laughter. That unspoken ambition, held in such tight silence, becomes its own kind of threat. The more restrained you appear, the more they wonder if you're planning something larger. It's maddening for them, but it's survival for you. You watch Mary closely. She is not well. Her skin grows pale. Her hands tremble, and her marriage to Philip of Spain has not brought her the joy she expected. There are rumors of phantom pregnancies, months of hopeful expectation, followed by quiet, inexplicable sorrow. She retreats more often now, consults her confessors more deeply. Some say she sees visions. Others say she hears whispers in the night. The court grows restless in the spaces her silence creates. You do not comment. You wait. And in that waiting, you learn. You learn how advisors rise and fall, how one poorly timed remark can change the course of a life. You watch as former favorites are replaced by younger, hungrier men. You note how Mary leans toward those who reaffirm her fears. You observe how power consolidates, how it flickers, how quickly it can be snuffed out by illness or gossip or a poorly timed rumor. There's a moment, small and easily missed, when you realize that you're no longer just avoiding death. You're preparing for rule. The shift is subtle. You no longer walk the court simply to endure it. Now you walk it to learn how to bend it, how to remake it. You begin imagining what it might look like with your seal on the letters, your voice on the council, your shadow on the throne. Historians later puzzle over this period. Did you actively plot your rise? Or did fortune simply fall in your lap as others misstepped? Some claim you kept spies, secret alliances, coded correspondence. Others believe you played the long game by simply doing nothing until doing nothing made you inevitable. The truth, as always, is more difficult. You did not force your path to the throne. You just never stepped off it, even when it led through fire. At night, you keep your habits private. You still pray, softly, cautiously. You still walk the gallery alone, listening to the sounds of a palace caught in uncertainty. You write letters you never send, rehearsing answers for questions no one's asked yet. And always, you wait. You've learned that power doesn't arrive all at once. It approaches like a distant tide, and you must be ready to step forward at exactly the right moment or risk being swept away. Then, one winter morning, the bells toll. Mary is dead. You are not in the room when it happens, but the news finds you swiftly, carried on the breathless tongue of a courtier who does not yet know how to kneel. The council summons you. They use the words you've waited a lifetime to hear. Your Majesty. You do not smile. You do not flinch. You only lower your gaze and murmur something that sounds like gratitude, but carries the weight of mourning. You do not cry for her, but you mourn her anyway. She taught you what power costs. She taught you how it can hollow a person out, how it can isolate and scorch and consume. And she taught you, without ever meaning to, how to outlive those who tried to end you. You bow your head at her funeral. You wear the proper black. But in your heart, you do not bury a sister. You bury a lesson. The crown is now yours, not by ambition, not by treason, but by time, by survival, by the sheer, terrible grace of enduring when so many others did not. But you know this. To wear it, you must become something new. The Elizabeth they remember is not enough. The girl who waited is gone, and in her place must rise a queen who wears the crown not as a gift, but as a mask. The morning of your coronation is colder than you expect. The air hangs heavy with fog, dampening the colors of the banners and the sound of church bells echoing from the towers. You are awake before the sun, though you pretend to rise later. Let the world imagine that queens need their rest. In truth, you've slept very little. The hours before dawn are when the questions speak loudest, even in silence. What will they see when they look at you today? A savior? A disappointment? A child in borrowed robes? You've rehearsed this moment your entire life, and still, your hands tremble as they prepare your coronation gown. It is heavy, stiff with gold thread, made in the style of your father's court, an echo of majesty past. You insisted on red for the main procession, not white. Red for royalty, for spectacle, for strength. There are rumors already swirling about how this choice defies Marian modesty. Let them swirl. You are not here to inherit your sister's shadow. You are here to outshine it. They powder your face until you seem like a statue come to life. Your hair is arranged into a crown of braids, your temples glinting with borrowed jewels. You do not recognize yourself. That is the point. Today, you are not Elizabeth the Wary, or Elizabeth the Accused, or Elizabeth the Sister Spared. You are becoming something new, something permanent. This is not just ceremony. It is alchemy. The crown they place on your head is not made for comfort. It is too large, and it pinches just enough to remind you that it belongs to the realm more than to you. You keep your chin level as the Archbishop anoints your forehead with holy oil, though the liquid runs cool and sharp down your brow. Your body is a stage now. Every movement is a gesture to God, to country, to history. You walk slowly because queens do not hurry. You lift your eyes only when the moment demands it. The people cheer. They crowd the streets with rough hands and open mouths, calling your name as if they've always known it would be this way. You wave from the open carriage and smile as your wheels roll over branches of rosemary and laurel laid in the road by eager children. It smells of memory and theater. You wonder how many of them remember the girl from the tower. Perhaps they choose not to. Perhaps they love you more as the version you present now. Invincible, untouched, untouched by fire or fear. The ceremony in Westminster Abbey stretches into aching hours. You kneel, stand, kneel again. Each Latin phrase pronounced over you becomes another link in a chain of expectations. They call you defender of the faith, supreme governor of the church, the voice of England made flesh. You repeat the words as required, but in your head, you are reciting another litany. Be careful, be calm, be clever. Never let them see too much. Your coronation orb is placed in your hand, and its weight surprises you. It is small but dense, like a planet made of gold and authority. The scepter follows, long and cold. You grip it gently, aware of how many eyes are watching for the slightest tremor. Later, they will say you carried it with grace. They always say such things after the fact. They will write that you looked regal, composed, divine. They will not mention how your shoulder ached from holding it for so long. The night brings a feast, and with it, more theater. You must toast, nod, smile, accept flatteries that feel like traps. Foreign ambassadors crowd near, each one cataloging your movements. The French envoy laughs too loudly. The Spanish one says little, but his gaze lingers. They are already thinking about marriage. You are already preparing your refusals. You retreat for a moment, under the pretense of fatigue, and step into a private antechamber, lined with embroidered panels and flickering torches. For a few minutes, no one speaks. You breathe. You press your fingers to your temples, trying not to smudge the paint. The crown is still on your head. You could remove it, but you don't. It wouldn't feel right. Not now. Perhaps not ever. You stare at the flame of a single candle on the table nearby. It moves uncertainly, caught in a draft. That is what you are now. A light they expect not only to shine, but to warm, to guide, to withstand the winds of faction, doubt, and time. The thought exhausts you. Not because you doubt yourself, but because you already know how much you'll have to give up to keep that flame alive. There's a knock at the door. They are ready for your return. You nod once, not to them, but to yourself. Then you rise, straighten your gown, adjust the edge of your sleeve, and return to the hall with the steps of someone who has always been queen, even if she had to wait too long to wear the name. Years from now, historians will speak of your coronation as a triumph, a clean break from the past, a day of light and promise. They will describe the way the abbey shone, the way the people shouted your name, the way you glided through the city like a phoenix reborn. Some will argue that the performance was more significant than the policy. Others will claim it was the moment England began to dream again. What they will not say, what they cannot say, is how tightly you clenched your jaw that day, how the crown dug into your scalp, how you smiled so long your jaw ached, how behind your eyes you were already calculating your first moves. Not because you wanted to manipulate, but because you knew, more than anyone else in that room, that this day was not the end of your trials. It was the beginning of your disguise. Because now, every day, you must perform the part they cheered for. You must become the woman they believe you already are. And somewhere inside that mask, you will have to keep track of who you used to be. Before the robes, before the fire, before the oil touched your brow and made you myth. But mirrors do not lie, and neither do memories. And tomorrow, in the quiet between audiences and proclamations, you will come face to face with both. The next morning, the mirror is waiting. It always is. Set in its ornate frame of gilt and mother of pearl, it reflects not just your face, but the myth beginning to harden around it. You sit before it in silence as your ladies flutter nearby, arranging brushes, bottles, combs. The window behind you filters pale winter light across the chamber, softening the edges of everything except your own reflection. You look tired, though no one dares say it. The crown has already begun to mark you. Not with lines, not yet, but with weight. The kind that burrows behind the eyes and settles into the hollows of your shoulders. Still, you sit up straight. You offer a neutral expression, the one you've perfected in place of contentment, the one that can be mistaken for serenity if viewed from the right angle. The preparations begin again. The paste is applied, thin and even, the white of it catching in the corners of your nose. Your cheeks are painted just enough to suggest health. Your lips, shaped into a rosebud, are darkened not for beauty, but for emphasis. You must be seen clearly from across a hall. You must look composed even under torchlight. You must appear, always, like someone who never doubts her own image. And yet, you do. Not always, but sometimes. The mirror doesn't blink. It offers you every angle of the performance, and none of the warmth. In it, you see your mother's high cheekbones, your father's hooded eyes. You see a history that tried to forget you. You see what the ambassadors will report back to their monarchs, scribbled in cursive. The queen looked well, firm in bearing, commanding in posture. No one will mention the pause you took before rising from the chair, the brief moment when you weren't quite sure you wanted to stand. They speak of you as a symbol, but you still live in a body that bruises, that stiffens with cold, that aches in the morning. You are not ageless, though they paint you that way. You are not divine, though they write poetry that implies it. The pressure to resemble the myth grows heavier by the month, and so you adapt. Your portraits become tools, each one carefully staged, each filled with symbols no one dares to question. In one, your hand rests on a globe, your fingers curled over the Atlantic, a subtle claim to empire. In another, you stand before a stormy sea, the Spanish Armada drifting defeated in the background. The details matter. The pearls that imply chastity, the ermine that signals divine favor, the eyes embroidered into your sleeves to suggest omniscience. You are constructing a woman who can never falter, and you begin to wonder, privately, where she ends and you begin. Your court calls you Gloriana now, the Virgin Queen. Astrea returned. Their mouths shape the words with pride, sometimes even reverence, as if the role belongs to them too. And perhaps it does. They need you to be perfect. They need a monarch whose life can be worshipped in verse and embroidered on cushions. You give them that. Or rather, you allow them to believe they have it. But in the mirror, before the court arrives, before the audience chamber fills, you are still Elizabeth. You are the girl who survived the tower, the girl who was told she was illegitimate, who was too smart, too poised, too Bullen. The one who learned how to pretend until pretending became indistinguishable from truth. The one who knows that trust is not given, only traded, and that even love must be measured against usefulness. Sometimes, you wonder what it would feel like to be plain. Not physically, though that too, but to be someone whose face does not carry a nation's expectation. Someone whose hair can gray without comment, whose clothing need not deliver a political message. Someone who can frown, forget a name, spill wine, and not have it recorded in dispatches. But you were never allowed to be plain, and so you learn to be brilliant instead. There's a story, half true, half gossip, that you once shattered a mirror in a rage after seeing a wrinkled form beside your eye. You don't remember if it actually happened, or if it was just another invention, passed between courtiers with gleeful caution. But it sounds plausible, doesn't it? You, furious at the betrayal of age, at the collapse of the illusion, at the first visible crack in the legend you've spent a lifetime building. You've become your own masterpiece, and yet you're also the artist, the frame, and the gallery wall. You dictate how you're seen, but the image takes on a life of its own. No matter how you feel, tired, uncertain, melancholic, the face in the mirror remains steady, painted into history. The illusion, once created, demands to be maintained. One of your ladies adjusts your ruff, tilting it just slightly to frame your jaw. She says nothing, but you catch her watching your eyes in the glass. You wonder what she sees. Does she see a queen preparing for another day of proclamations and petitions? Or does she see a woman bracing for the moment when her reflection no longer fits the story she's told? And what will happen then? Will they still love you if the paint cracks? If the symbols lose their shine? If your voice grows thin and your hands too slow to sign every page? You do not know. No one does. Even the most loyal have a limit. But you do know this. As long as the mirror reflects what they need to see, the kingdom holds. And for now, that's enough. Your footsteps echo down the corridor as you leave the chamber. Behind you, the mirror remains, watching nothing, reflecting nothing, until someone else comes to prepare the next layer of ritual. You have audiences to attend, letters to answer, eyes to meet without revealing too much. And just beyond all that, a growing tension you can feel in the pulse of the realm. Another queen is watching you now, one who carries her own claim, her own legend. And whether you meet her in person or only across parchment and cork rumor, you know that soon the mask will be tested by someone who wears one of her own. You do not rule by inheritance alone. The crown may rest on your head by law, but it's your endurance that makes it stay there. Every day since your coronation, you have ruled with the memory of your own near destruction echoing in your chest. You do not forget the tower. You do not forget the hush that followed your mother's death, or the whispered names of traitors, or the letters that could have ended you with a sentence. You carry all of it into the presence chamber, hidden beneath velvet and lace, and they love you for it. They love that you smile through the strain, that you dance in embroidered gowns, give clever speeches, wave to the crowds as if you've never known the press of iron bars or the cold of marble floors beneath bare feet. They call you Gloriana now, not just queen, but icon. A figure out of legend, glittering with symbols and impossible precision. You don't correct them. You've learned that people need stories more than they need facts, especially when the story is you, and you are everywhere. Your face is painted into triumphs, stitched into tapestries, engraved on coins. No matter what happens, harvest failure, rebellion, plague, there you are, looking back with serene detachment. You are not just the monarch. You are the solution, the symbol that says everything is still under control. A stable queen in an uncertain world. But it's not enough to be still. You must move, too. You must be seen. You begin the royal progresses, long, dusty journeys through towns and manors and fields. You are carried on litters. You ride for hours in stiff carriages. You sleep in borrowed beds, nod politely at pageants and allegories, accept dedications from trembling mayors. They paint towns just to greet you. They fill fountains with wine. Once, in Norwich, a child costumed as an angel descends from a church tower on a pulley system to offer you a poem. You accept it without flinching, though his landing is shaky and the poem uninspired. Your presence is the gift. That's what they believe. And in truth, that's what you've allowed them to believe. You've become so good at walking, waving, pausing, and glowing that even you sometimes forget how much of it is planned. There is a formula to appearing divine. You've simply memorized it. And while you perform, you govern. Your mind is sharp. Your counsel is loyal, if not always brave, and you know how to use both. You do not rush decisions. You weigh them carefully, using silence like a lever. You are not quick to anger, but when it comes cold. You learn to wield threat and favor with equal grace. You do not scream in counsel. You do not plead. You raise one eyebrow and watch men unravel. They say you are indecisive, that you take too long to choose, too long to marry, too long to act, but they do not understand your method. You wait because you must, because to choose too quickly is to offer a weakness someone else can exploit. You delay because delay is power. The longer they wait, the more they reveal, and you see everything. It's a balancing act, and you walk the wire every day. One foot in ceremony, the other in strategy. You charm courtiers, while reading reports of naval movements. You dance at court feasts while considering executions. You accept flowers from blushing nobles while knowing their fathers conspire behind your back. And through it all, you keep your face steady, your tone warm, your bearing composed. But nothing tests that composure like Mary Stuart. She arrives into your life not physically, but as an idea, first a rumor, then a threat, then a reality. A queen without a country, a woman with a rival claim to your throne, an exiled cousin with Catholic support and noble blood. You do not hate her, not at first, but you recognize her. You see the performance behind her softness, the steel beneath her sorrow, and you know instantly that you cannot share the stage. You resist ordering her death. For years, you resist, even when she's found with letters suggesting plots, even when she inspires rebellion, even when your counsel begs for her head. You hesitate, not because you pity her, but because you understand her too well. She is a queen, like you, a woman who survived everything except perception. And if you end her, you become something colder than Gloriana. Still, when the evidence becomes too much, when her complicity can no longer be denied, you sign the warrant. And then, almost immediately, you try to take it back. Historians will never agree on whether your remorse is real. Some believe your signature was always meant to be final. Others claim you wept for days. Some say you whispered her name as if it might still be undone. What they don't understand is that it was not her death that haunted you. It was what it meant, that you had crossed a line and could never return. Because after Mary, everything changes. You harden just slightly. Your image grows more distant. You lean more heavily into the symbols, the rituals, the portraiture. The stories become sharper, the myths more polished. You allow fewer mistakes, fewer glimpses behind the curtain. You have ruled for years now, but after Mary, you begin to reign. You become something not even you fully recognize. And that is the truth no one writes into their verses. That Gloriana was not born at your coronation, but in the slow burn of survival, in the silence of a tower cell, in the fire of rebellion, in the pause before signing a name that would end another queen's life. You are not a miracle. You are a consequence. And still, the court calls you divine. But the illusion has needs of its own. It must be fed, ritual, costume, control. It must be reinforced at every level of court and culture. You've learned how to feed it so well that it's begun to take on a life of its own. The mask no longer simply hides you. It begins to define you. And as your reign stretches on, you begin to wonder what lies beneath it, if anything still does. Because the next chapter of your story is no longer written in policy or bloodline. It's written in ink and fabric and code, in pageants, in portraits, in the strange elite theater of a court where every whisper becomes doctrine and every glance could unravel the whole illusion. And that's where we begin again, beneath the pearls, behind the portraits, in the ghostly rituals that keep your image alive and your reality just out of reach. The moment you step into the chamber, they all rise, not for you, but for the mask. You understand this now? You've understood it for years. Their reverence is not for the woman beneath the ruff, but for the illusion she wears like armor. The courtiers bow because they must. The ambassadors nod because it's protocol. But it's the image, the ageless, God-kissed queen they believe in, that they truly serve. You walk slowly, letting the hem of your gown trail across the flagstones like a whisper of silk. And the performance begins again. You are always performing. Every breath you draw, every glance you offer, every pause between words is a calculated act. You cannot relax, not in public, not in private, not even in the quiet of your own thoughts. You've done this for so long that it no longer feels like a disguise. It's a second skin now, more enduring than the one beneath your paint. The mask doesn't come off when you close the door. It follows you from hall to garden to chapel to council chamber. changing only in its shade and detail. The rituals begin early and stretch far beyond the court calendar. There are the visible ones, of course. The annual Accession Day festivities, the lavish royal progresses, the appearances at the tilt yard, where noblemen joust beneath banners bearing your initials. These are grand spectacles, and you float through them as if you were borne on a gust of sacred wind. You wave from ornate balconies. You give speeches with just enough warmth to make poets weep and enemies hesitate. Your presence itself is treated as divine confirmation that the kingdom stands. But the real performance lives in the quiet repetitions. The way you rise at the same hour each morning, no matter how poorly you've slept. The way you endure the hours of preparation, hair arranged strand by strand, paint smoothed over your skin like a promise, jewels fastened with fingers that know your neck better than your own. Even your prayers are performed. You kneel with perfect posture, your voice soft, but clear enough to be heard by whoever might be listening through the cracks in the wooden screen. They call you the Virgin Queen, but that too is a role. Not simply an absence of marriage, but a myth reinforced at every level of court culture. Your chastity has become currency, proof that your rule is guided by no man. The bishops invoke it from the pulpit. Poets fold it into metaphor. You allow the symbolism to swell until it becomes untouchable, less a truth than a necessity. The fiction must remain intact, because if you are ever seen as simply a woman, they might forget to treat you as a sovereign. And so the act continues, and you refine it endlessly. A gesture here, a phrase there. You study reactions the way a general studies the battlefield. You know which compliments are returned, which gifts are withheld, which rumors to ignore, and which must be buried. Your control is not loud. It is not brutish. It is velvet-gloved, carried in the slight tilt of your head, in the tempo of your silence. You can silence an entire room by sipping from a goblet. But the mask requires care. You must be seen, but not too much. Familiar, but unknowable. Adored, but distant. You permit your image to be reproduced, but only on your terms. Portraits are inspected personally. Artists are corrected, sometimes dismissed. A shadow too deep here, a brow too furrowed there. No detail is allowed to erode the illusion. You don't age, not publicly. Time passes, yes, but not across your face. There's one day, quiet and small, it stays with you more than the coronation, or the progresses, or the battles. A day when you stepped into your private closet and saw a new servant, very young, standing too still, eyes wide as moons. She dropped the brush she was holding and whispered, "I thought you would be taller." You didn't reprimand her. You didn't laugh. You simply walked past her, slowly, as if nothing had been said. But that comment lingered longer than any poem. It reminded you that behind all the ceremony, someone still sees the human shape beneath the crown, even if only for a second. And yet, you do not allow the mask to slip. Not ever. You do not weep in public. You do not speak of pain. You do not age. You grow into your legend like ivy on a palace wall, layered, rooted, too tightly woven now to be pulled down. You're not even sure what lies beneath it anymore. Perhaps it doesn't matter. The people need Gloriana, and you need her too. The demands of court life grow stranger over time. Nobles name their daughters after you. Men style their beards to echo the lines of your favorite advisors. Fashion adjusts itself to echo your silhouette. You begin to feel yourself echoed in every room you enter. They quote you before you've spoken. They assign meaning to your smallest expressions. One day, you scratch your wrist during a reception, and within a week, the French ambassador reports that England's queen may be suffering from an affliction of the blood. You learn to keep your hands still. Every year, your image grows more distant, more sacred. They call you goddess, muse, angel, phoenix. You do not contradict them. Not because you believe it, but because you understand the value of it. It is easier to rule as a divine idea than as a flawed woman. Power rests better on marble than on skin, but the cost is real. You feel it in the silence of your chamber, in the echo of your own voice when the guests are gone, in the weight of the letters you write but never send. And still, you choose the mask. Every day, you choose it, because it is the only thing strong enough to hold the kingdom together, and perhaps now, the only thing strong enough to hold yourself together too. There are times when you pause at the edge of the mirror, wondering what they'll paint next. What image will be preserved when you are gone? Whether they will remember the woman who bore the weight of an empire, or only the paint, the gowns, the poses. Whether the illusion will outlive the breath that created it. And perhaps you think it already has. Still, the brush waits. The paint is prepared. The rough is laid out. You sit again before the mirror, back straight, expression neutral, while another portrait begins to form, one of many, each more distant than the last, each claiming to show you, though you're never quite sure which one actually does. Because behind the performance lies the portrait. And behind the portrait, something even stranger waits, something caught between flattery, immortality, and the quiet terror of being remembered too well, or not at all. They no longer paint you as a woman. Not really. They paint you as a force, an allegory, a celestial event, a queen removed from flesh and time. You sit still for the artists, of course. You let them measure your face, your hands, the line of your chin. But what ends up on the canvas is not you. It is a version of you rendered in symbols, secrets, and golden varnish. A version that belongs more to poetry than to bone. The painters are instructed carefully. Every detail must speak. The pearls cascading down your bodice are not just jewelry. They declare your purity. The sword beneath your chair, half obscured, is a quiet reminder of justice. Your fingers, long and pale, are posed precisely, sometimes on a book, sometimes on a globe, sometimes on a rose, plucked just enough to bleed. Nothing is accidental. Even the way your eyes fail to meet the viewer's gaze is intentional. You look above them, beyond them, toward something higher, toward England itself, or God, or myth. The Armada portrait is the most famous of these. In it, you are surrounded by triumph, framed by oceans and victory. The Spanish fleet burns behind you like an afterthought. Your hand rests lightly on a globe, fingers splayed over the Americas, unbothered by the storm outside the windows. You do not smile. You do not tremble. You are still, eternal, as if painted not in oils, but in will. That portrait is copied endlessly. You begin to see it everywhere, in halls, in foreign courts, even embroidered into tapestries. And each copy grows more abstract. The symbols swell, the face smooths. The woman at the center becomes less human and more divine. You understand why. The real you, the breathing you, has too many doubts, too many memories, too many mornings where the mirror shows weariness that powder can't fully hide. But the painted you? She never blinks, never hesitates, never disappoints. Sometimes you wonder if they believe you are the woman in the portraits. If they truly think you never age, never feel pain, never falter. The younger courtiers do. Their letters to their families describe your skin as flawless, your posture as untouched by time. They say you float, that you radiate majesty, that your voice, even when stern, is sweetened by some divine light that settles around you like mist. You hear these things and do not correct them. You smile. The truth would only unsettle them. You are, after all, their constant, their mirror of stability. You outlast wars and winters and weddings. You are always there, center stage, glowing from within a frame of velvet and myth. Even as your fingers stiffen, even as your eyesight fades, you remain unchanged in paint. That is the luxury of oil. It never forgets what you asked it to preserve. One artist, too bold for his own good, once suggested a new style of portrait, one that might capture your natural grace without excessive ornament. You dismissed him after a single sitting, not because he offended you, but because you saw what he meant. You saw yourself as you truly are, tired, shrewd, still learning how to be alone in a room full of eyes. You cannot allow that version to escape the chamber. You cannot let the world see what you see when the paint is stripped away. So you remain vigilant. You approve every likeness. You correct every eyebrow, every curl. You send back drafts that miss the message. Because these are not portraits. They are weapons. Messages in paint. Tools of memory. You are painting your own afterlife, one brushstroke at a time. You are deciding what future generations will believe, and you have no intention of letting them see weakness. There's one portrait that never hangs, one that never leaves your private closet. It shows you in black, unadorned, with no symbols, just your face, lit plainly. You keep it because it is honest. You look at it sometimes late at night, when the court has finally quieted, when your ladies are asleep and your thoughts are loud. You study it the way you study state papers, searching for meaning between the lines, for signs of the woman you used to be. Did anyone ever know her? Did you? Historians still debate how much of the Virgin Queen was invention. They write pages on the evolution of your iconography, how you slowly vanished into your own myth. Some argue it was a conscious strategy. Others claim it was the natural result of a long reign. A woman becomes a statue, they say, if she stands still long enough. But the truth feels simpler. You became legend because it was safer than being seen. The portraits offered control. You gave them your image, and they gave you silence. A silence in which you could rule, undisturbed by sympathy or scandal. A silence where the painted woman bore the burden of perfection, so the real one could work in peace. Still, the painted woman grows louder. People now expect to meet her, not you. They speak to her in court, in ceremony, in poetry. They ask her for blessings, for guidance, for miracles. And though you perform her well, it becomes harder each year to remember where her expression ends and yours begins. The court continues to orbit. The flattery thickens. The masks grow heavier, and the faces around you change. Grow younger, lean closer. Some speak with reverence, others with suspicion. But all of them are watching, always watching, for a crack in the paint. The eyes are always there. In the tapestries, in the portraits, behind the fans of your ladies, and the scrolls of your courtiers. You walk through the palace as through a theater where every seat is full and every audience member knows your lines better than you do. No glance is innocent here. Every gaze carries a calculation. What did she mean by that smile? Why did she pause before answering? Did she frown slightly when the Spanish ambassador bowed too low? You've learned that your silence is louder than most people's speeches. The whispers, meanwhile, travel faster than your messengers. They slip between the tapestries like smoke, sliding under doors and across courtyards, weaving themselves into the hems of noblewomen's gowns and the corners of scrolls. The court has always thrived on rumors, but here, under your reign, they've become a kind of currency. Not just idle gossip, but a coded language of allegiance and warning. A nod can birth speculation. A glance can end a career. You hear it all, even when they think you don't. You've trained your servants to report with precision, not just what is said, but how it's said, and who was nearby when it was spoken. You know which duchess pretends to faint when mentioned in letters from Rome, which advisor has grown too close to a woman who has never spoken aloud in your presence, which cousin smiles too wide when discussing succession. Even your most loyal allies have learned to speak carefully. Cecil pauses before he delivers bad news now. Walsingham speaks more in code than in counsel. You read between their words, weighing each phrase as if it might be double-edged. Sometimes it is. This is the game they play, and one you must always win. They talk of your court as a golden age, and in some ways, it is. The gowns shimmer, the music is unmatched, the poets flourish, and the language itself bends around your name like ivy on stone. But beneath the pageantry is the rustle of danger. Rebellion is never far. There are always whispers of plots, some real, some imagined, some planted to test loyalty. You receive dozens of reports each week, intercepted letters, suspicious travel plans, a household that's purchased too much ink and not enough food. Each detail is reviewed, not because it always matters, but because sometimes it does. You maintain control by knowing everything, or appearing to. You make no threats, but people fear you all the same. They say your anger is not loud, but final. That when you dismiss someone, they vanish not into disgrace, but into memory. They're not entirely wrong. You've had to be decisive, cold when needed. No ruler survives on charm alone. The younger courtiers try to flatter you with comparisons to goddesses, to muses, to divine wisdom given form. You smile at them, tilt your head slightly, and offer a compliment in return, measured and vague. Then you watch them stumble over themselves for days, replaying the moment, unsure if you favored them or destroyed them with kindness. You still hold the power to raise or ruin with a gesture, but you no longer enjoy the spectacle, not like you once did. Now, it simply reminds you how many of them would see you fall if they thought they could rise in your place. That's the unspoken truth of court. Everyone smiles as long as the light shines on them, but shadows move faster when no one's looking. There was a day, years ago, when a poet gifted you a sonnet so full of metaphors, you couldn't tell if he was praising you or mocking you. You laughed, publicly, thanked him. Later, you had his letters intercepted. He hadn't plotted anything. He was just young and foolish and thought himself clever. Still, you moved him to a distant post, not out of anger, out of necessity. Cleverness, unchecked, is a liability. Your ladies, even the closest ones, are watched. You trust them with your appearance, your letters, your mood, but not with your secrets. Not fully. You share moments, not truths. You reward them with jewelry, with favor, with quiet glances that say you are seen. But you never let them see too far. Not because they are unworthy, but because they are human, and humans speak. And then there are the foreign visitors. Men with titles too long to remember, sent to observe, to charm, to propose. They bow too deeply, offer gifts, speak in rehearsed phrases. You measure each one. You let them wonder. You let them hope. And when they leave without a clear answer, they report back that England is still ruled by mystery, that the Queen has secrets, that her court is made of beauty and danger, folded into lace. Sometimes you think they are right. You do have secrets, not all of them your own. Some you keep to protect the kingdom. Some you keep because to speak them would be to hand someone a knife and show them where to place it. You carry those secrets behind your smile, your posture, your carefully chosen words. They weigh more than a crown. You wonder sometimes how many of your courtiers truly believe in the version of you they serve. How many see Gloriana when they bow, and how many see the woman beneath the pearls and paint? The poets write of your radiance, your wisdom, your impossible elegance. But what they never write about is how many locks your chambers have, or how many nights you spend awake, listening for footsteps that don't belong. The court will always whisper. You've made peace with that. You've even turned it to your advantage. A whisper can be redirected. A rumor, once noticed, can be fed just enough truth to lead it somewhere harmless. It is not the silence you seek now, but control over the noise. And still, the masks grow heavier, the performances more elaborate, the rituals more sacred. Even in solitude, you are never truly unseen. There's always one more set of eyes just outside the door. Always someone waiting for the moment your expression cracks, even a little. Because the illusion, is not simply for them anymore. It's for you, too. You perform the queen not only to lead, but to remain, to survive. And yet, beneath all the ritual, behind every glance and gesture, something real still pulses. Something private. Something yours. A secret that has always followed you, and that even now, as your court bows and retreats, refuses to vanish into history. The story is simple, at least on the surface. You never marry. You never take a lover. You remain untouched, England's virgin queen. That phrase has become its own kingdom. It protects you from Parliament, from papal claims, from foreign suitors who believe a woman without a husband is unfinished. You let them believe what they need to, that you are married to your people, that you belong to no man because you belong to the realm, that your purity is sacred, eternal, preserved by virtue or divine favor or willpower no mortal man could undo. But myths are like mirrors, angled to flatter, never to reveal. And beneath the myth, there are rumors. There are always rumors. They curl around your name like ivy, soft and relentless. You hear them whispered in galleries, buried in letters, passed through households that think you don't notice. That your gowns are cut just slightly wider in the waist than they used to be. That the queen is never alone with her ladies, not because she fears scandal, but because one has already passed. That a certain boy born to a noblewoman bears your eyes. That you cannot sleep without hearing a man's voice in the next room. You never confirm, never deny. Your silence becomes your strongest sentence. And the more you say nothing, the more they invent. One story claims you wear a padded stomach beneath your corset to hide what was lost. Another insists you sleep in a separate chamber from your own to protect an heir hidden in secret. Even now, historians pore over your letters, your portraits, the household records, searching for inconsistencies, gaps in the timeline, payments to midwives, unexpected gifts, always looking for the crack in the myth. You once read a report sent from a spy in your own court. A carefully detailed note describing how many times you smiled at Robert Dudley during a banquet, how your hand lingered on his shoulder, how your private walks with him lasted longer than usual. You read the report, folded it in half, and kept it. Not for fear, for amusement. As if any man in your position could speak to someone twice in 1 week without being called a traitor. Robert is the closest they come to a confession. You do love him. You always have. But love, in your world, is never pure. It's always wrapped in caution, muffled by surveillance. You allow him near, but never too near. You give him titles, but not your hand. You write him letters in a voice that is softer than your public speeches, but guarded all the same. There are moments when you nearly let the performance slip, but you don't. Not even after his wife dies mysteriously. Her neck broken at the foot of the staircase, her death ruled accidental, but never accepted as such. You know what they'd say if you took him then. So you don't. Even his final letter to you, the one you keep in the box by your bed, is worded carefully. He calls you my queen and signs it your eye's servant. A phrase you understand too well. You read it more often than you should. You never let your ladies touch it. You tell yourself it means nothing now, but you never forget the shape of the handwriting. You receive love letters from others, of course, some you expect. Some surprise you. One French noble sends a poem so clumsy that you read it twice out of pity. A younger ambassador once writes you a note, comparing you to the morning star. You laugh at that one for days, not because it's wrong, but because it's too well rehearsed. You've used that metaphor yourself, and still the myth holds. You enforce it now more than anyone. You have your gowns cut higher, your portraits painted smoother. You let the court see only what you allow. When they ask why you never married, you offer a different answer every time. None were worthy. The kingdom was my consort. My heart belongs to no one and to everyone. Each answer becomes another stone in the fortress you've built around your real life. Even your ladies repeat the myth now, not just because they believe it, but because it protects them too. Your virginity is a shield cast wide. As long as you remain untouched, so too does your court remain innocent. So they defend the story. They whisper it into their daughters' ears. They add flourishes. They swear they've seen you turn away from the scent of men, that you once tore up a letter from a suitor before even opening it, that your chambers are watched by angels, not guards. And maybe they are. Maybe the story has become holy now, elevated beyond questioning. Maybe the myth is stronger than the woman who first needed it. You no longer know where the performance ends and the protection begins. You sometimes wonder what would have happened if you had chosen differently, if you had married, if you had borne a child. Would England have accepted it? Would your rule have been weaker or stronger? Would you have been remembered as a woman or merely as a mother? It is the question that wakes you in the small hours, the question that no poem ever dares ask. Historians still speculate. Did she love? Did she lie? Was she hiding something? Or was she simply surviving? You think of those questions as you prepare for yet another appearance, another ceremony. The collar is fastened, the paint applied. Your ladies smooth your sleeves. One of them hums, an old lullaby you remember from Hatfield, though you pretend not to. The chamber smells of rose water and beeswax and the faintest hint of worry. You step into the corridor, and the hush descends. The hall ahead is lit with gold and movement. A dance, a procession, a performance. You're not even sure which today. But it doesn't matter. The people are already waiting. And so you walk forward, toward the platform, toward the stage you built. You walk like a queen who has never known longing, like a virgin who has never known doubt, like a woman whose story has always been a crown and never a cage. The mask is secure, the silence holds. But the pageantry has only just begun. There is a rhythm to power, and you keep it like a heartbeat. Step, pause, glance, nod. Every motion practiced until it becomes instinct. You no longer question how you move through space, only how others interpret it. The rituals of majesty govern your days more strictly than any law. The velvet cushions, the kneeling courtiers, the way your food is presented with a flourish, even when you're too tired to eat. These are not indulgences. They are choreography. Your life is a series of entrances. You do not walk into rooms, you arrive. Doors open just before you reach them. Guards turn in synchronized half steps. Your name is not spoken lightly, not even among the maids. Her Majesty becomes a spell cast across every chamber before you enter, its syllables trailing behind you like incense. Even your silence is ritualized now. You nod instead of answering. You blink slower. Your breath is part of the ceremony. The court has become its own religion. You are its altar. Each day begins with offerings. Morning petitions laid before you. Noblemen bowed low with hopeful gifts. Progresses through the countryside become pilgrimages. Wherever you travel, villages bloom with color overnight, as if touched by divine spring. Children dress as cupids. Bakers sculpt your likeness in sugar. Church bells ring, even when no service is called. And you? You smile and wave. You thank them in perfect phrasing, letting them believe they've glimpsed the divine, if only briefly. Even the smallest gestures are rehearsed. The tilt of your head during a knighting. The moment you extend your hand for a kiss. The breath you draw before speaking in Parliament. These are not choices anymore. They are requirements. You've become so much a symbol that anything unscripted might be interpreted as weakness, or worse, a change in favor. Once, during an illness that left your voice hoarse, you canceled an appearance at court. By evening, half the city believed you were dying. By morning, foreign ambassadors had written home about possible succession crisis. You attended the next event with your throat raw, speaking only in smiles. Your clothing, too, becomes scripture. The colors, the fabrics, the arrangement of pearls, all curated to declare meaning. White for purity, gold for sovereignty, black for solemnity, though you've learned it's best not to wear it too often. A single ruff, if too high, might suggest aloofness. A necklace too ornate could be seen as decadence. You walk through your wardrobe like a general through a map room. Each thread a maneuver, each brooch a treaty. You rarely wear the same thing twice in public, not because you are vain, but because repetition invites interpretation. If they see you in emerald 2 days in a row, someone will whisper that you favor Ireland. If your shoes are too plain, the merchants will wonder if your treasury is thinned. A loosened sleeve, an undone clasp, any imperfection could become prophecy. Even your footsteps are measured. You've learned to descend staircases slowly, as if gravity itself hesitates to press against you. You pause in doorways. You look slightly upward when spoken to. You cross thresholds like omens. Everything is designed to preserve the distance between you and the world, not just for them, but for you. Because without the rituals, you are too exposed. The ceremonies do not stop, even at night. There is the ritual of undracing, of being unpinned, of stepping backwards into silence, while your ladies remove the mask, strand by strand. Your prayers are said aloud, but only certain ones. The ones your chambermaids are expected to hear. The rest remain inside, half-formed, pressed like dried petals between pages you will never open. You do not eat alone. You do not bathe alone. You do not walk without someone marking your pace. Even in the quiet of your privy chamber, someone is always just outside the door, listening. Once, you dropped a comb. Before it touched the ground, 2 women had reached to retrieve it. You thanked them with a gesture. You had no words for how startled you were. The rituals give shape to the day. They keep the court orderly. They make you legible, but they also fence you in. You sometimes dream of stepping out of rhythm, just once. To walk barefoot down the marble corridor. To speak without filter. To eat with your fingers. To dance when no music plays. But those dreams vanish as soon as you wake. You don't know if they ever belonged to you, or to the woman you might have been if someone else had worn the crown. There is power in the repetition, yes, but repetition becomes habit, and habit becomes wall. The more you perform the rituals, the more they replace reality. You don't know anymore whether you attend a feast to celebrate or to be seen, whether you kneel to pray or to be witnessed kneeling, whether the court dances for your favor or simply because it's afraid to stop. And yet, you persist, because you must. Because without the rituals, the court unravels. And if the court unravels, so does the myth. And if the myth dies, what's left? So you nod. You rise. You speak your lines. You wear the weight. And you convince yourself, as you always have, that the act is the purpose, that performance is protection, that the hollow spaces behind the rituals don't need to be filled with anything real. But late at night, after the robes are folded and the candles have guttered to smoke, something still lingers. A presence not in the room, but in your chest. A quiet, stubborn truth that no ritual can smooth away. You feel it there, between your breath and your pulse. The part of you that remembers who you were before all this, and the part that wonders if she's still in there, waiting. The woman they remember is not always the woman you are. When they look back, they will see the marble, hard, cold, imperious. They will see the pageantry, the pose, the polished language that never cracked. But beneath all that, there is still breath, still a spine that aches, still a heartbeat that wavers when the crowd cheers too loudly. You have learned to sit for the portrait, to freeze in the proper expression, to turn slightly toward the painter's light. But that light never catches what matters. It never lingers on the person beneath the polish, the one who speaks only when no one is listening. You remember being that girl, young Elizabeth, tucked behind heavy doors, listening to boots echo down tower corridors. You remember her ribs pressing against her shift when meals were missed, her hands fidgeting with beads on a gown she couldn't afford. That girl knew how easily favor turned to death. She saw how quickly a smile from the king could fade into silence. That girl was never allowed to be just a child, and the woman who came after her was never allowed to be just a woman. Even now, in a court sculpted in your image, you are not entirely real. You are a series of expectations: queen, virgin, savior, mystery. You play them all. You step into each role as needed, like parts in a play that never ends. And yet, late at night, when the paint is gone and the doors are closed, you sometimes meet yourself in the silence. Not Gloriana, not Majesty, just Elizabeth. Her skin no longer powdered, her eyes less guarded, her mouth set in something that almost resembles peace, though it never quite holds. What the court sees as divine restraint, you sometimes feel as erasure. The performance has lasted so long that even you cannot recall what's beneath it. You speak in phrases tailored to be repeated. You smile only as far as protocol allows. You receive worship as if it were duty. But none of this is intimacy. None of it fills the places within you that once longed to be known and loved without calculation. You cannot step outside the role now, not without collapsing everything you've built. And so, you remain exactly where you must, letting yourself vanish piece by piece behind the ideal they've named you. And yet, you haven't vanished entirely. You've tucked parts of yourself into corners the court cannot reach. In the margins of letters never sent. In the smell of rose oil pressed into your wrists on difficult days. In the small, private rituals that are not public theater, counting your breaths before a difficult council, holding your dog to your chest when the room empties at night, rereading Dudley's final letter even though you know it by heart. These moments aren't for the historians or the portraits or the whispers. They are for you, and only you. You are called childless, alone, a monarch who left no heir. But you know that legacy isn't always born in flesh. It can live in the architecture of a nation, in the grammar of power, in the bones of those who followed your path without knowing why. You gave your country a version of stability, carved from instability. You made strength out of fear and grace out of constraint. You taught a kingdom to see a woman on the throne, not as anomaly, but as permanence. They will argue forever about who you were. Some will see you as ruthless, others as tragic, still others as divine. Some will insist you loved Dudley too much. Others will claim you never loved at all. Many will swear you died without regret. Others will say you died haunted by what you gave up. They will assign meaning to your silences, sculpt personality from rumors, turn every absence into evidence. And they will all be a little wrong. You were never meant to be simple. That is the most human part of you. Even now, you find yourself retreating into the palace's quietest hours, when the torches burn low and the velvet shadows are long enough to hide the crown. In those moments, when the court has finally gone still and your ladies have ceased their careful movements, you step into a part of yourself untouched by myth. You walk slowly through the halls, listening to your own breath. The marble underfoot cools your skin. Your hands, ungloved, brush the stones. You are not posing, not performing. You are just moving, still breathing, still here. There is comfort in this final solitude. You have grown used to being alone, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. You know now that no one truly shares power. It is always carried alone, and it is always heavier than it looks. You have borne it with elegance, even when it bent your back. And now, as the end draws near, you can feel something shift. Not in fear, but in release. The roles, the rituals, the layers of expectation, none of them will follow you past this final hour. They were never meant to. They served their purpose. They built the legend. but they were never meant to carry your soul. That you will take with you quietly. The air in the chamber changes. Outside, the wind turns soft, brushing against stone with the hush of something ending. You look once more at the place that shaped you, the throne behind the curtain, the mirrors that flattered and deceived in equal measure. And you understand, at last, that what remains after the mask is not emptiness, but endurance. Now the time has come to rest, and that's where we begin to draw the curtain closed. And that's where we'll leave it for tonight. From the painted silence behind a velvet ruff to the pages burned in a locked writing desk, from the cold eyes of a council who never stopped watching to the crumbling myths clinging to a crown worn too long. It's been a long, slow walk through the lonely brilliance of a woman who became more legend than life. If you're still awake, thanks for staying with me all the way to the end. And if you drifted off somewhere between the coded portraits, the poisoned letters, and the quiet creak of a throne that never allowed rest, that's perfectly fine too. That's really the whole idea. If you enjoyed this quieter, sleep-friendly walk through royal history, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more. And I'd love to hear where you're listening from and what time it was when you pressed play. Drop it in the comments. It's always lovely to see how far these soft stories can travel. For now, I'll let the gold flake gently off the painted face of a queen. The silk curtains fall across the empty bedchamber, and the hush of a reign built on restraint settle back into the stones of Whitehall. Sleep well, and I'll see you next time.